Hello, it's me. I am also the Nutty Professor, but today is going to be another Behind the Mask episode. So I'm going to be telling this more as Sohail, uh, or possibly as one of my junkie underworld aliases. And I use pseudonyms when I go binging based on my actual name. So rather than Sohail, I use sometimes Saul, and I sometimes use Saul, Saul. And there's a druggy connection there because there's a program, Better Call Saul, based on Breaking Bad. So I'm addressing you today as Sohail and a little bit as Saul and Saul. The news is I'm still clean. 10 weeks today. But, and this is a big but, as close, I went as close to the edge as one can possibly go. There was no margin. I was there. I walked on that line. And I'm using that metaphor purposely. It's a line, and the line was there. And I didn't take it in, but I walked on it. Now, I have to set this up a little bit. I have said before that I've had offers from people that I party with, other people that I call junkies, to have a sober lunch or a sober dinner, and they were all quite proud of me, and they send me texts, and I reply. But I've said before in the podcast that I was hesitating to do it because I knew that if I saw them, I would probably fall. So I was very conflicted. Now, what happened last week was I've thought about how in 12-step groups, people tell stories, but they're always bad stories about addiction and what they did to get their stuff, and and the people that were hurt by it, and so on. But and there is that aspect to addiction, of course, particularly to substance use. But I wanted to see addictions as a relationship. I mean, relationships have good and bad. There are positive aspects to a relationship. That's why they exist in the first place. Now, when a relationship becomes unhealthy and you want to end it, and I think everyone knows it's difficult. I mean, in that framework, each time I fell, so I'd go 2 months, 3 months, and then I'd fall. I'd have a relapse. In that framework, it's sort of like ex-sex. You meet your ex and then you have sex with them. It's sort of like that. So, but it's hard to end a relationship. And then I had another idea. Now, I don't know if this is going to sound odd to you, but I had an idea that to kind of end a relationship when you know that it's done. I wanted to have a little maybe ceremony. You know how these days they call funerals celebrations of life. So, and a friend of mine died last year, and they had a celebration of life. So I had this idea of when I'm really ready to say goodbye to the addiction, really, really ready, then I was thinking of having maybe a little ceremony in a podcast. And in one of these podcasts, I was thinking of having maybe do a little reading from Burroughs or from Carrie Fisher, one of the people I admire, about their relationship to drugs. And I was going to. I have a Buddha candle here. So I was thinking of maybe lighting the Buddha candle and doing a little ceremony. And I discussed this with my analyst, and he said, if you feel comfortable. And I said, that still, it doesn't mean, I mean, I could have the ceremony, but still fall afterwards. It would be like a resurrection, like Lazarus or something. You can always come back. It's not final because it's symbolic. So all of that happened on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, I ended up, and I'm going to make this clear, I initiated contact. And now this is one of my party friends, a woman, and she has given me permission to talk about her and what happened on Wednesday in this podcast. And her pseudonym starts with a C. So I'm going to call her Lady C or Lady Kane. Now, we saw in the reveal podcast that that's one of the names of the substance. And my editor found a really good illustration from a comic of a character named Lady Kane with a sword. And I like that symbol for her because she can be fierce. She hasn't really shown me her fierce side, but she's got it. I wouldn't want to F with her. And it's a tough world. It's a tough world when you live in junkie land and you're living day by day, day by day. It's a struggle. It's a different kind of struggle than the one I'm going through. It's a different kind of struggle than the people who turn back, but it's a struggle. So I initiated contact. So in a way, I was playing with fire. And we have exchanged texts, and she did congratulate me on the podcast and say that she liked them. So on Wednesday, I sent her a text just asking, and the last contact we had, she was not having a great time. As I said, it's a tough existence. So I just sent her a text asking, are you doing any better? How are things? And did you see my latest podcast? And she replied saying, I love your podcast and things are still not quite smooth. And I was the one who said, you want to go for a late lunch or early supper, sober? And she said, fine. She said, So I got ready. And I have another little trick that I haven't shared with you. When I'm going out, I sometimes tell my cat, and I only do this when I'm pretty confident that I'm going to stay clean. So when I'm going out, I will promise my cat. Remember last week I talked about the planks on the door and stuff like that. This is another little trick that I use. So and you know how much the cat means to me. So when I'm heading out, I just say to her, your daddy's going to stay clean. I'm not falling. So I told her this time, I said, I can't promise, because I knew that I was going to be around someone who has access and would probably get some after dinner. And I knew that. And at that point, I think the odds in my mind were about 60-40. That 60-40 that I was going to fall. So, and I did not promise my cat, which is a big thing. When I promise her, I don't break it. I don't. But I did not promise her. And the other thing I did was, if I was 100% that I was going to fall, I would have taken a cab. It's about a $20 cab ride to where she is. But I decided that I'd give myself the benefit of the doubt. I'd take the car, and then if I fell, I would have just left the car there and taken a cab back. And then gone to pick, and I've done that kind of thing before, gone to pick up the car a couple of days later. I really didn't know what was going to happen. On the one hand, I was looking forward to a sober dinner with, and we get along. She's very intelligent, self-educated. The first time we had a conversation while partying, I called her an autodidact, a self-taught person. And she gets a lot of information from the internet. Some of it a little maybe dubious, but she gets a lot of information, and particularly about substances. She's a connoisseur, So I pick her up, and she lives in a motel. A lot of junkies do, because it's day by day. It's fairly transient. Now, some people stay in the same motel for a long time, and with motels, you don't have to put a first month and the last month, and you've also got people coming and going, dealers and all that stuff. That in apartment buildings there might be issues. So a lot of people do live in motels. It's a more transient sort of lifestyle. There was a movie called The Florida Project, which actually showed a motel like that, but in Florida, near Orlando. And you kind of get a sense of what that motel life is like. So I picked her up, and we went to a very nice restaurant nearby. She had wine and some shots, and I only had Coca-Cola, this kind of Coke. So, and we had a very nice conversation. She talked about the podcasts, and she congratulated me. And she said that before, when I used to party with her, I had told her I was thinking of doing podcasts, but she said, people talk. Junkies say all kinds of stuff, but they don't follow through. And she said, you actually did it, though. You actually went and did the podcast, which are very good, So she's like, and then she said, I had faith. She said, I did believe even back then that you were actually going to do it, and you've done it. And then she said, she thinks it's her prediction. She believes that I'm going to become like a rock star of YouTube. And I said, I don't think so. The Nutty Professor is never going to be PewDiePie or whatever.
My name is PewDiePie.
But whatever, So we had a very nice conversation. We talked about the podcasts. We talked about Dionysus, the god of junkies, the party god, the god of intoxication. We had a great conversation. Towards the end, she said, if I get stuff for myself, and I couldn't ask her not to, I said, she goes, and you have to, it's a dance, it's a ritual. You have to start contacting your dealers and see who's available and who's got stuff. So she started, texting on her phone, and she's like, if I get stuff, I won't do it in front of you. Would you be okay with that? And I said, one option would be just to drop her and go home. But I hadn't seen her in a long time. We were having a nice conversation. And I just happened to get the preview of the next podcast. So I said to her, we can watch it together. I'd appreciate your comments, and it's something we can do. Yeah. So I did. I went back with her. We stopped at a liquor store. She got some stuff for herself. I was drinking Coca-Cola. So we're sitting in the motel room, and she does her deal. She has contacted this one, contacted that one. The person brought it to the door, and then I go into the bathroom when there's somebody there, and dealers don't like to see strange people. So she did her deal. And that's a common process. So she did her stuff, and it's there. And it's on the counter, and it's on a piece of glass. And I just said to her, I said, don't bother going into the bathroom. And, to go into the small bathroom. And I said, and it's her room. I said, just do it here, And she says, don't watch. So she did a line in front of me. Now I cannot tell you how strong the cravings were then. I was facing the werewolf because I wanted nothing more, and apparently it was good stuff. I wanted nothing more than just do a line, And I was in, you remember my framework? OSAT, 1 second at a time. And this was actually 1 second at a time. The cravings were so strong that I couldn't. I was pacing, and I had a couple of thoughts. And these thoughts recurred in my mind, and I focused on them. So one thought was that if I fell, I would have to say it today, And I thought of, there's 1,400 viewers. Out of those 1,400 views, if even 5 of you are struggling like myself, struggling junkies, struggling to, even if 5 of you, I would be giving a very bad message. I'd be saying, it can't be done alone. It can't be done by yourself. You have to go 12-step. You have to go clinical. And I did not. It's not a message I want to give, you know. And I also thought about my crew. These two highly dedicated, individuals here who put a lot of time and effort into these podcasts. And for me to fall would be insulting to them. So I thought about that, and then I kind of detached myself. And I've had, over the week, I found a guy online who, he did like a TED Talk, and he's a psychologist, and he's got a thing called willingness, where it's sort of Zen, where instead of saying no to the craving or trying to avoid the craving, you acknowledge the craving, you become aware of it. And that actually reminded me a little bit of Burroughs. The guy I talk about, the guy who wrote Junkie, because he said, and he was into all kinds of things like a little bit of Zen and this and that, and he had said once that if you say no to the craving, it's going to come. You can't stop it. But instead of saying no, you have to detach yourself and let the craving go through you. Now, that's very abstract, and it's very hard to really do in real life. But that night, with my thoughts about the message that I'm giving to viewers, my thoughts about my crew, I was able to detach. And I was there 1 second at a time. And and she said that at one point I went like this, and I was like almost semi-fetal. I was like this, and I was pacing, And afterwards, she told me, she said, I wouldn't have let you, And she's furious, like I said, If she didn't want me to do it, I would not have done it because, And she says, I was not going to let you do it. Because she figured out during the dinner that I'm serious about this. I can't do it, I've got stuff to do. I'm turning back. I'm turning back because of my list. And you know what I just told you about thinking about you guys, the strugglers, and thinking about my crew? That's my list. Remember, I had in Patap, I had the list of reasons to turn back. So I've got, and as I said, the list keeps changing. So now the list includes my struggling viewers and my crew. Now, at the same time, I will never, ever tell Lady C or anyone else to turn back. It's their choice, And she's free to do what she wants, and it's a tough life, but there's a reason. It's very complicated. Everybody's life is complicated. Junkie's lives are particularly complicated. Now, I don't know if I want to say this next part, but she did give me a reward, and it was a treat, but it was not a substance. It was an activity. I can imagine that there's probably lions frolicking behind me right now. No idea what my editor is going to find for this one, frisky cats or something. Now, it was nice. It was a nice treat, and I said this to her. I said, I would have preferred to do the drug because that's how powerful the stuff is. It's better than almost anything. So, I made it. And she gave me a look. And she said, I can't do it. I can't do, looks on a demand. But she gave me a look saying, this is a look of admiration. And I haven't had a look like that from a woman in a while, And it was a look of admiration, it was, And it meant quite a bit to me. So and she walked me to the car because I was on nothing. I didn't have to take a cab. The only thing I was on was some Coca-Cola, this stuff, I had a couple of cans. And I did say, I said, look, this has been torture. I don't know if I can do this again. I really don't, I don't. I did it that once. I did it, but I did it. Now, the other thing I have to keep in mind is not to get overconfident, because that will be that could be my downfall. If I become overconfident and I keep seeing people from that world, I think I agree now. And I have to learn this stuff for myself. I do agree with one of the things that the 12-step people say, which is that when you are, for them, when you are a recovering addict, you cannot see people from the other world, people who are still using in their term, you can't see them, you have to sever ties. And I tried, and it was nice. We had a nice time, and I have a lot of respect for her and for all junkies, all using junkies. In 12-step groups, at the very end, they have a prayer, and they pray for using addicts, and they pray that they're going to stop. And I'm just going to, and this is for you, Lady C, and this is for all the other people who are not turning back, and I will never tell you to turn back. I just wish you safety. Just be safe. Take care, And she knows this. She's very, she's very astute. You have to be to survive in that world. So I drove home, and all the way back, I'm just thinking, holy shit, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe. And while it was happening, she said, you can do it. She said, I believe you can do it. And I kept going, I don't think I can do this. This is too tough. But I was driving back, and I was like, I did it. I did it. Now, that doesn't mean, and when I got home, I thought about this, and I told Geetha, my cat, what had happened, and I thought about it. That was the ceremony. That was the ceremony, because she did lines of cocaine while watching the podcast I did about naming cocaine and all the slangs. So to me, that was, and I discussed this with my analyst in terms of the celebration of life, a funeral, and he said, you don't want to bury, psychologically, you don't want to bury an addiction, because if you bury an addiction, it's back to denial, symbolically. So he says you want to lay it to rest. And I can't think of a better way of laying it to rest than someone who is not turning back, who I will never tell to turn back, someone doing, that substance that I wanted to do so badly while watching my podcast naming the substance. So I want to say right now, and I don't know if I can see her again or any of the people from that world. Like I said, I think I agree with the 12-step people. It's you can't. It's just too difficult. It's too much playing with fire. You'll get burnt, So at this point, I just want to say, and there's no guarantees, I'm back to day by day. It's one day at a time, as always. But I feel a little stronger now. I have stared down that frickin' werewolf. I have looked him right in the eye, and I said, I can control you. So I want to say goodbye to civilians. Goodbye to junkies. Goodbye, struggling junkies. And a very special goodbye to Lady C. Bye.